Hello, everyone. I am Melissa Forziat. I'm a keynote speaker and the host of this Halt and Catch Fire rewatch podcast. Now, when I speak, my topic is something that I call Take the Doughnut, which is another way for me to say carpe diem. It's all about going after the things that you want in life. Something that I wanted this year was to rewatch the show Halt and Catch Fire, but this time actually talk about it with other people. And that has been a blast to do. And now I'm up leveling that and getting a chance to talk with people who actually worked on this show. And before I introduce my guest for today, just a quick housekeeping item. If you are brand new to the show, the episode recaps are spoiler free and safe for you up until the episode that you're on. With the interviews, they could be spoiler filled. We could mention any detail from any episode, any season of the show. So just be aware of that up front. But having said that, this one might be safe for you with where we are in the rewatch right now. So I am so excited to introduce my guest for today, who is Aleksa Palladino, who is on season 2 for 10 episodes. Welcome.
Hi.
It's so good to have you here. Thank you so much for doing this interview.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into it with you. I mean, first of all, before we get into anything about the show itself, do you remember much about your process for getting onto the show? How did that unfold for you?
I do a little bit. It's funny enough. I've had the same email address forever, so I went through my email and I found like the original casting breakdown for it. So I'm going to read it to you. So
This hasn't happened yet. Nobody has
it's really
shared
cool,
this
right?
before.
I bet I still have it because I never throw out mail. Like I have a ridiculous amount of unopened mail, but this one I opened in 2014 on January 9th. And there was the longest character description I think I've ever gotten on any character. And I was like, oh, these people are so specific. There's no way I'm going to be the person they're looking for. Because there was like 3 different sections where they were like reiterating what they wanted. So here they are. So for Sara, a beautiful and cultured freelance journalist who exudes intelligence, depth, and warmth. She has recently reconnected with Joe Lee Pace, who she first met in college. Though she comes from a wealthy family and continues to be well-connected in society, she does not live opulently. She's a self-reliant woman who's too proud to take money from her father. Previously married and recently divorced, she's skeptical about relationships and intends to approach her life and her romance with Joe with her eyes open. She brings a discerning, investigative approach to both her work and her life, but her connection to Joe is deep and very real. Unlike most others, she sees Joe for who he really is, and the two share a candid, spiky, and fun rapport. And then there was more notes. The key is, this is additional character notes. The key is we want to believe in this relationship, that it's real from the get-go. Sara should have a decidedly natural, grounded, warm, and irresistible quality to her. We're seeking a gal who's equally at home at Le Cirque, eating caviar, or backpacking, whatever. It just goes on and on and on. She's Joe's intellectual equal. She's smart, investigative, keenly observant, and sees through Joe's bullshit. Nothing gets by this girl. She is formidable and substantive. And so I was like, I don't know. You guys, I don't know. It's a lot.
Wow.
It's a lot to you usually get like just a couple of lines of who the person is, and so much.
Beautiful essay on
Yeah,
Sarah
I think
Wheeler.
they really had a vision for just, I think, how much space they wanted her to take in the room with him too, because he's such talk about formidable characters. Like, it was really interesting. So yeah, I went in for it, and there were moments of where Sara was that were really sort of mirroring where I was in life too, because I was separating and just starting a divorce. And there's something about that time, I think, in every person's first divorce that is really so much of yourself is coming through. It's really what it, I think, is about, especially people who get married so young. There's like a time where you're like, okay, I need to be on my own in the world, or I need to become my own person, really. So there was just a lot of sort of natural things that I could pull from where I was in that moment that I felt, because there was something too, and this like I don't know, I get kind of personal quickly, but like there was something for me about wanting a divorce in real life that felt so like you're living on your own terms now, and not that there were terms in a marriage, but just that sort of growing up together with someone throughout your 20s and then deciding like there's more to me that I need to meet alone. Anyway,
This
more than
is amazing. No, this is amazing.
yeah,
So you get a breakdown like that. It
yeah.
seems too specific to want, but it's also resonating with where you are in life.
Resonating, yeah.
So from that point, what happens for you? You go in for some
I
number of auditions, I'm guessing.
went in, this is where it gets foggy. I know I definitely went in for one. And it was a casting room. I'd been in a bunch of time, like, I've been doing this since I was 14. So you start to really know your rooms, and, it was just really warm, and they had sort of known me since I was little. And so I was telling them where I was in life too, just sort of catching up. And there just seemed to be, um, a lot I could use if I were to get the part. And then I don't know if I went in for a second meeting with them, but I was up for another show at the same time. And I went to New York for the weekend, and it was sort of this like, which one was gonna happen first? Or which one, or sometimes you lose both. It's like, it's such a weird business, you can be up for like four things and walk away empty handed, But yeah, I got the call, I think on a Friday, that I had gotten Halt and Catch Fire, and I needed to be down in Atlanta, like working that Monday, the following Monday. And I'd never been to Atlanta. And so I went down over the weekend, and I had like the flu or something. I was sick. And in one weekend, I rented an apartment, like went to IKEA, like grabbed a mattress and all this stuff, and like got myself set up in a little studio apartment where there was just like a bed on the floor, like your essential kitchen stuff, your essential bathroom stuff, and went straight to work on Monday. And yeah, I'll never forget that. That was really like, just go and do it,
Well, because did you know you were going to be on the entirety of season 2 at that point?
I did. Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, when for people who were showing up for one episode or two episodes, you don't have to set up your entire life there,
No,
but like,
knew
you're
I
going
was
to be in
gonna be there.
Atlanta for a good stretch at that
Yeah, I
point.
knew I was going to be there for like 6 months, 5 or 6 months.
Yeah.
And yeah. So
Wow, what an incredible journey. Would you have had a chemistry test with Lee Pace
I
in
did not
your
have it. No.
Oh, that's an interesting choice they made. I think it's so
No.
important that
Yeah.
you
I
that you
mean,
two gel, and you do.
yeah. Yeah. He's great. Um, yeah. No, I didn't. It was surprisingly smooth. I mean, I was just coming off of Boardwalk, which had like a lot of, you know, I don't know. I guess it kind of just people, knew my work at that point well. So it was kind of I don't know, maybe I really don't know. That's for that.
Yeah. Well,
But
so you've been part of so many projects in your career, and I'm curious, how does the set of Halt and Catch Fire stick out in your memory? Like, what are the things about this show that felt different than other shows for you?
yeah, a couple of things, I mean, especially comparing it to Boardwalk Empire, which was such a huge cast, where Halt and Catch Fire was really intimate, and we spent a lot of time together off camera, partially because no one was an Atlanta native. And so everybody was sort of uprooted from their lives and someplace where, you don't know anybody, you don't know even the city. So you're sort of exploring it together, or all getting dinner at so and so's place after, we would do our own table reads every time we got an episode, because that's also the thing with like the pace of television is it's so fast, and sometimes on like on a production scale, they don't have the time to do these things, but we thought it was actually really important that we still all hear the scripts together, you know. And so we would do, yeah, just a lot of our own things to really understand where we were. Like it was such a great group of actors because we got some really good actors on this show, and they just loved like the work of it, you know, and really understanding the scripts and the storylines and where each character was in their own development. And you know, we're trying to like understand the themes of a full season just as much as the viewer is, you know, as we're getting things, trying to understand and see where we think it's going to go. 'Cause a lot of times we don't know either. You
Well, to
know,
that point, I mean, so the breakdown you got tips the hand quite a bit of what they're trying to do with Sara.
it does in hindsight for sure.
But like, so you do all that, you get that information, and then you don't have, I guess, the scripts yet. How much did you know about where Sara was actually going?
I didn't know anything. No, I don't. Yeah. I mean, so much of, I mean, on every show I've ever done, I never know where it's going. And I really like it that way because, I mean, that's like life, you know, we can assume where it's going, but we're usually wrong. And there's something that keeps it so fresh, I think, you know, for you as an actor to just be in actual response to like where you're going, you know. I remember I'd get certain scripts, especially on Boardwalk, you know, it was brutal. It was like they were so sad. You know, some of the I mean, it was such good writing on that show too. And it's just like you'd get certain scripts, you'd find out one little piece about your character and it would just you'd feel it, you know, and it's kind of nice to get those within the week of shooting something because the feeling is still really raw. Um, so I like that you don't know where it's going, you know.
Having played Sara all the way through,
Mm.
how would you describe her yourself? I mean, yes, there was the breakdown that you got, but by the
Yeah.
time you've gotten all the way through your episodes in season two, what would you describe Sara as? Like, what are her traits? What is her personality?
You know, I think she was someone who I think was caught in between being like a skeptic about a lot of emotional stuff, but really wanting to believe, you know, which is such an interesting metaphor with like the whole space setting that you know they meet under, is like wanting to know what's out there and having like your own sort of skepticism about like the inner space too, you know, but wanting to take a chance and believe that, you know, I think she was someone who really wanted to believe that love could be real, like this time, you know. Um, so yeah, there's some moments that are pretty devastating, you know. Um, so yeah, I saw her as that. I saw her as being, you know, definitely someone who is grounded, sort of the counterbalance to how I think driven uh Joe can be. Not that I don't find Sara to be driven, but I think it's not a need for um a part of her to be confirmed by the world. I think it's like a very different, they have a different relationship with the world for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so I liked her as a counterbalance to him. Like even in just that sort of opening scene, I think, where we meet her, if I remember correctly, like he's all sweaty and he's just come back from jogging and he's just like talking about a million things at once. And she's just sort of seated and grounded and like, you know, like there in the moment where he's kind of always spinning someplace else. Yeah, I don't know. It was interesting. I really liked the way they set up that introduction. I feel like it really works. Um, so
And part of the thing that's interesting about it too, and I know this now that I'm doing this deep dive and actually reconnecting with or connecting for the first time with people who are fans of the show. where they left off season one, apparently they had sort of done a cliffhanger that I missed, like on every previous watch, and they had Joe setting off for his hike to Fisk Observatory, and he's having this conversation with the gas station attendant where he's leaving his car, and the guy says something like, the person who's up there, like, do you know her? They drop the word she, and you
Yeah.
can tell like Joe knows he's going up there specifically to meet
Her.
her,
Yeah.
whoever she is.
Yeah.
And I guess it caused a lot of speculation for people who heard the word she in their first watch. I missed that part. So there were, I guess, all sorts of hot takes on what he was going to encounter, but it turns out he was going there to reconnect with you.
Mm.
I'm curious, as a character that's coming off of divorce, a breakup, a
Yeah.
significant moment in her life, and then suddenly Joe comes walking into a place where you probably thought you were going to be alone for a minute and maybe wanted that. As season 2 unfolds, Sara sees all kinds of red flags. Like it's like one red flag after another from Joe, some of which your character sees and some of which is sort of hidden from you.
Yeah.
And I would say she takes pause at some of them early on, but clocks them. Like I feel like Sara always notices them and
Yeah.
makes a choice to keep moving through them for a while, until she doesn't. So like, how did you see, first of all, before I get any more specific than that, how did you see that relationship unfolding? What was Sara's journey in that process with Joe?
I mean, I think it really just was not wanting to be wrong about someone again. I think so much of her own past was informing the moment, and I think that happens so much to us in life where we're like, this can't be the same situation, can it? Like, is it me? Like, am I sort of, I think she was clocking it, a lot of it, but I think um we can be, I mean, we're so intelligent, we're so perceptive as people, and when we still want something to work out, you know, we self-deny, we deny what we know, or not even deny, but like we give things time and space. And, I think we give the people we love a lot of chances. We also are giving ourselves like a lot of chances to be wrong about what we're picking up on. So, I mean, I think that it's just sort of a natural part of being human and being in a relationship is like, especially if you've had one before that, you know, you found out you were sort of being used a bit for something else, you know. Um, but yeah, I think, it's so interesting too, as we start to get to know Sarah's father, and who's this other sort of like big presence and um similar in a way type of man to Joe. You really got to see like how in a negative way they could mirror each other. For her, there's like that one scene where they're at a dinner or something and they're just discussing her. I can't remember what it was, but I just remember she has this line where it's like, does anybody want to know what I think? And I remember just thinking like, oh, this is the dynamic she's used to. And like that's another part of it too, of like, how do we sort of ignore these red flags or see them but continue to move through, is like there must be something that also feels very familiar and normal about the feeling of being not sure about the honesty of someone, or the intention, or believe what they say, don't look at the action. Like they did a really good job of mirroring Joe and her father,
Jacob.
Jacob. Yeah.
Mhm.
You know,
That dynamic is really interesting to me. And, like through Sarah's best efforts, it's almost like, and now that you say that, it's really hitting me that her previous relation, like Peter, also had a very close business relationship with her dad. So it's like, no matter what what limits she tries to set in the relationship, Jacob can sort of pull people back into her orbit. So it's almost like how much of this is on Sara even in this process, because I think about the journey that Sara goes through, and like maybe midway through this season, she actually sets a really hard limit with Joe and says, "Can't do this. I'm leaving,"
Yeah.
and leaves.
Yeah.
Like she goes to Austin and she's ready to be done with it. And Joe, through that dinner,
Yeah.
Joe has this realization like, oh, I'm being just like Jacob and I don't want that, and tries to change, and maybe is honestly trying to change.
Yeah.
And like Sara comes back and says, nope, if we're going to do this again, we get married today and we leave this city and everything behind.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
we're going to California. That's it. But Jacob's going to Jacob and he's going to pull things back. So it's,
Yeah.
how much of this is really Sara's own agency in her life to make these choices.
Right. Totally. Yeah. And yeah, it's so interesting too, because it's like each person is sort of having to grapple with like sort of their fate, like the free choice that we feel like we have, or agency, and just sort of the fate. And I always feel like that's sort of Joe's journey in general, is like, is it his fate to be a certain way? Like, no matter how hard he tries to go at it straight, is it just not like, is he not able to, And I mean, those are sort of the most fun characters to get to know, because I don't know, those are just sort of those age-old questions of yeah, how much can we change, and how much are we really meant to, you know?
I'm wondering if you landed somewhere with that question as you were going through, because I think a huge part of that relationship with Sara for Joe is for us as the audience to say, has Joe changed?
Absolutely.
And sometimes you think maybe, and sometimes you're like, definitely not. But to play your character, you probably needed to have some sort of a take on that. Or
Yeah.
maybe you even had chats with Lee as the scripts were coming out. So kind of where were you landing in that spectrum?
It's ground that keeps shifting. I think she keeps trying to pull him onto one side of the field. And when she and then she is setting those boundaries of like, if you aren't here, basically, like, I'm not going to be here either. I think it's yeah, I think it's just a ground that kept shifting from moment to moment between them, of like, especially when you think of reconnecting up, outside of the chaos of the day, like meeting up the mountaintop and sort of just talking under the night sky for however long they were doing that. That's that's like an idealized version of each other, or at least a version that's not being, tainted by just the daily ambitions of whatever. And so you have that relationship, and now you have to bring it into the world and see how it does, see how strong it is there. And a lot of things collapse in the world, a lot of relationships fall apart when there's real stressors on it. And so I think a lot of it is that too, of like, that's what I remember. I kept thinking of, she's just trying to get back to that mountaintop with him where it all seemed peaceful together, and like, not the shifting ground that I think they wind up on in the real world.
Something that isn't really spoken to in this in the scenes that we see in the show, but is a specter that sort of looms over the relationship anyway, is that I think both of your characters have dads that are very like hard, cold businessmen and very in their way manipulative. And we sort of forget about Joe's dad in the process because we haven't seen him on screen in a
Yeah,
long time once we hit season 2.
yeah, it's true.
But he has sort of the mirror image of Jacob as his own dad. And weirdly enough, Jacob's the one he seems to get approval from sometimes. So, like, it wasn't really in the script or the dialogue, but is that something that you were exploring at all in how you unpacked the scripts?
I wasn't thinking about Joe's dad. I think because he just never came into my character's realm. But I mean, I'm sure Lee was thinking about all of that. No, I mean, for me, it was more like my relationship with my on-screen dad, with James Cromwell, who's amazing. Um, it was more that sort of triangular, dynamic of having two really similarly aggressive, sort of stubborn, and like, people who are really willing to bend things to their needs. And yeah, just sort of her kind of coming to the realization that she's basically with someone who's like her father, but then as a kid, you're still trying to protect your father. It's just like a whole thing.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that relationship with her father specifically. So, there's a lot of tension there.
Yeah.
And uh, there's a lot of sort of blame being put on Sara for the Peter relationship. And,
Yeah.
Sara articulates for us somewhat early in the season that her dad had gotten wrapped up in some business deals with Peter, but they weren't real. And her dad lost a lot of millions on whatever those deals were supposed to be. And so on the one, Sara seems to be taking that upon herself, but then, it also seems like as we get some other scenes with Jacob and Joe, it's sort of like, oh, maybe he kind of knew what was happening here.
Mm.
And he seems to be the one sort of perpetuating these things.
Mm.
So, talk to me about the tension between father and daughter there. What did you see in that relationship?
I mean, just a lot of that, like what we've been talking about. Just it felt like the sort of dynamic that children have where they're just nothing they do is good enough, like there's such a there's such a precedent set for what achievement and what success looks like, and it's definitely financial in that sort of a household, growing up. And you know yeah, just I think she's such a different person from him naturally that there's probably not much of an eye to eye, you know? And so, in a way, like finding men that are sort of like her dad is a way of her, I think, trying to impress him in a way, and be closer to him and beyond what's familiar. But those things have always sort of turned on her too. So it's you know, yeah, it's a messy situation. She should have just been single for a while.
So I'm gonna do a little wind up to a question here, I guess, and then end with the most closed-ended question of all time. But there's this scene that you're not in
Okay.
where it's Jacob and Joe.
Yeah.
And at one point, Jacob sort of really takes a look at Joe and he's like, oh, I see you. You're a man who's never going to be satisfied. I can use that. I can make money from that.
Right.
But he just got engaged to you. So, like, okay, Jacob sends over a prenup,
Right.
but what's the conversation with you about his assessment that Joe's a man who will never be satisfied? So there's that whole thing. And I remember watching that scene and going, oh, like, I think I did it on the deep dive for this podcast. I was like, oh, Sara, Sara, Sara. So here's my question. Does Sara's dad love Sara?
Oh. Um, I mean, you know, I mean, he probably thinks he does. Love is one of those things that I think is easier to say you do, especially like in a parental situation, than maybe the other person actually feeling it, you know. I don't think she's felt it really, you know. I think it just reminds me again so much of those dynamics where it's you're always trying to sort of win approval or be seen, be cared for by someone who their interest is on such a surface level, you know, and that's just who they are. It's money, it's power, it's making things, it's good decisions, it's all this. It's like how, you know, how cooperative you are or obedient as a child is probably like what makes you good, you know, as opposed to having like an actual authentic connection with each other, or, you know. So I think it's just, you know, it's just a hard and I think, you know, a very common dynamic between parents and kids of not really feeling seen for who you are and having that not be valued. And I think that's them for sure. But I think he probably thinks he loves her and wants what's best for her. Um,
Hmm.
mhm.
Let's talk a little bit about the behind the scenes experience. So obviously you kind of had a scene with most of the major actors and or characters in the show, but you worked primarily with Lee Pace and James Cromwell. So like, talk to me about working with them. What were some of your experiences in working with those two?
I mean, they're the best. I don't know. I was really lucky on that one because it was such a, in my own life, such a like stuff was really changing in my world. And they're both just really gentle people, which is what's so interesting because they both can play dark really well, but they're gentlemen and, you know, just very kind and very, um, yeah, they were both really there for me in some really beautiful ways. And um, yeah, I don't know. I don't really, I feel like I've said most of what I remember of just like, you know, there were definitely lots of dinners that we all did. And, you know, Joe, Lee, Lee and I would run lines a lot and we'd make them really silly. We would do them in accents and just try and like memorize them by making them funny to us. Just definitely an approach. Um, but yeah, we would do them like really bad act them together to remember them. Um, you know, it's just fun. It's so fun when you're working with good people. You
And
know?
then in those moments when you got a one-off scene here and there, you know, you got one scene with Scoot and Carrie
Yeah,
where you do a dinner party. You
yeah.
got one scene with Mackenzie, which was an awesomely blocked scene in a garage.
Yeah.
So
I
you
was also
got these
by
moments.
far the shortest person on that entire set, which everybody knows. The internet already knows that. Yeah, there was lots of good jokes about that. Yeah, no, I was like, wow, huh? Apple box, anybody? Want me to be this short? Okay. I remember that too. There'd be times where they'd do like a Dutch angle to get me and Lee in one shot, you know. It's funny. They were like really playing with the height. They liked it.
And they can do that kind of thing on that show, like with the Dutch angles. That's a style they already set up. So it just looks like, hey, we're just doing the thing we've always
Yeah,
done.
ready in the moment. Good.
Yeah, but when you had those moments to sort of play with other characters on screen, do you remember much about those moments when you actually got a chance to interact with other people besides the people, you know,
I
between
mean, it was
besides
great.
James?
Yeah, it was, you know, I thought everybody on that show was such a good actor. And I mean, Scoot is so good. I love what he does with, you know, his character. And it was, yeah, I mean, we were all hanging out anyway, you know, outside of work. So it was weirder to not have scenes with them, you know. It's and I've had that a bunch of times on shows where I'm sort of in like a pocket over here of a show, you know, like Boardwalk was the same. It was, you know, so yeah, it's sometimes weirder that you're not having scenes with everybody because you're like, what is going on your side of the show? Like, you know. Um, so yeah, it was cool to have anything with them. Uh
when you were getting scripts, I mean, obviously all of this is happening at a really fast pace and you have a lot to memorize, but you were also doing table reads as a group. So how absorbed were you in the story of the other characters that were happening with the scenes that you weren't in?
I wasn't as absorbed in them. I mean, you're hearing them all and you're understanding, you're trying to, at least, on a show like this one, you're really trying to understand what like the theme is for a season two, because they really are thematic writers, and we didn't know where season three was going. And once you do, it's like, oh, I see how they got there, but you don't know that that's where it's going yet. And so you're trying to really understand, like, what are the questions that they're asking as writers on the bigger scale, the stuff that doesn't come out. It's just sort of the subtle threading of everything, which felt very much like in the family of like, can we change? Are we predestined to be a certain way? Yeah. And like this whole thing with Joe of like, are these efforts sincere, or, is this the long game? You know? Um, and I think, he, Lee made a choice for himself of what that was. But it's like, as an actor, you make a choice and you absolutely have to, but the story still is sort of telling you what it is anyway, which is so interesting. Um, so yeah, I don't remember what you asked.
Yeah, as you're saying that, one thing that I think there's a lot of debate. There's been a lot of discussion, even on the the episodes that I've been dropping. Fans have been coming in and saying like, okay, if this is a long game, what's the long game for Joe? And
Yeah.
for me, I have a really strong opinion about this, even though I'm trying to cover this in as much of an unbiased way as I can. But as I've been going through the episodes, the scene that keeps coming back to me
Yeah.
is very early on. Sara and Joe get engaged,
Yeah.
and it's sort of like somewhere with the back half of an episode, and Joe proposes
Mm.
and Sara accepts, and at the end of the episode, where it feels like that should be a celebratory, we should be getting a celebratory scene between your two characters, what happens instead is we see Sara asleep on her bed in the apartment, and Joe is
Mm.
up playing a secret game of tank battle with Cameron as an anonymous user. He
Yeah.
knows he's playing Cameron, but Cameron does not know she's playing him. And that scene has been haunting me for the entirety so far of season two, where I
Yeah.
just think, wow, right on the back of getting engaged to Sara, he sought out a private game with Cameron
Totally.
in a pretty sneaky way. And I mean, and the thing is, Sara is clocking, like, oh, you're trying to get, why are you doing all this with Mutiny? Like, what is happening here? Why can't you let this company go? It's not your company.
Yeah.
I mean, for you, when you think about the big picture of this season,
Yeah.
what was the long game for? Was he trying to get to Cameron? Was he happy with Sara? Like, what could that relationship have been if not for, let's say, Jacob's meddling?
I don't know. I think for me at that moment, it was someone just like wanting to be someone he's not, wanting to be happy in this new life, doing all the things that he thinks would make him or somebody like happy and normal and all these things. And it's not you, it's like, is he happy with Sara? Like, you know, some part of him is. I think it's just like that's the thing with a character like Joe is like there's all these fractured parts of him that aren't um he's like a shattered man, and the pieces don't communicate with each other, and so there is a part that's happy here, but there's another part that is, it's that thing of like, yeah, you're never going to be satisfied. And I never really thought about it like, on a romantic level, but yeah, it's just, yeah, I think just someone who can't find that peace, in himself. That anyway, you get
Yeah, absolutely.
it.
So I'd like to give an opportunity for you to, share any shout outs. You worked with a lot of people on the cast and the crew, and there may be people that you worked with that you just really enjoyed working with, and you want to make sure their names are heard, for the fans to really know.
Well, I mean, everybody was great, but it is a long time ago and I don't remember a lot of things. But I mean, another addition to season 2 was Mark O'Brien, who's so great. He was great. Um, yeah, and then all the Mutiny guys were so great. I'm still friends with a couple of them, and it was just I don't know, the whole environment was just really warm, you know. But yeah, it was like a decade ago.
That's so fun though that you have all these relationships with the Mutiny guys, but I don't think you had a single scene
I
with
don't
them
have any.
ever.
It's
It's
just
such a bummer.
Joshua Hoover. I forget what his character's name is, but
Bodhi, yeah.
he's so great. He's just a really top-notch human being. So I still talk to him here and there. And
Aw.
and then yeah, Mark and his wife and their child, I still see sometimes. Yeah, they're great.
I think that the fact that your character and Mark's character started on this series at the same time, about an episode apart from each other, was a really good sort of, there was a really interesting complement in
Yeah,
your journeys with the respect, like his
I know.
relationship with Mackenzie's character with Cameron, and then your relationship with Joe. It was just like, I think had either of them stood alone, it wouldn't have been as easy to spot parallels and things that were happening. But because you were both doing things sort of separately from each other, it's like, oh, they're both encountering the same struggles in their relationships. If these two could only talk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally.
Oh my goodness. Well, is there anything else that you want to make sure that we know about the show as we start to wrap up here? Anything that we didn't get a chance to talk about? I didn't ask the question to get you there.
No, I mean, you're way more thorough and versed in this than I am at this point. No, I mean, no, it's interesting to look back and see what you do remember, what does stand out, or like, you know, yeah. Sometimes it's not much, but there's some stuff that stood out for me. And
There's a lot here for you. I think there's probably like a sort of a naturalism there because you were encountering a lot of these questions in your life. And so probably
yeah,
it's
I
sticking for that reason.
think so. And again, because it was just such a good environment, like there's shows that you're on sometimes and it feels weird to be there. You know what I mean? Especially I'd never joined a show that had already been established, and sometimes you don't know what that's going to feel like to come into something that's already, you're coming into bonds that have already been made. It's like school, it's like joining in 10th grade or something. But this
And
was
it's hard too, because you don't necessarily know. I mean, we now know after seeing the whole body of work, the 4 seasons, that every season sort of reinvented itself. But
yeah,
going from season 1 to season 2, that's not a pattern yet. You don't know that
right.
that's happening.
Exactly.
So it's like maybe the hardest season to come into if you're
Yeah.
not, starting the show.
Yeah, and I hadn't watched season 1. Like I think I tried to cram some of it in, but but it was just, I mean, I think the thing that I take away the most was like Atlanta is amazing. It was such a great place to be. And then it's just everybody, top to bottom on this job was really great to work with.
Hmm. So, in terms of what's come after Halt and Catch Fire for you, is there anything that you've released since then or that you're working on now that you can talk about that you want to make sure that the fans know about?
Oh man, I mean, yeah, I've done a lot of shows since then.
I mean, the question really would be is, well, like, what are you working on now or what's come out
What
lately?
am I
But it's
working?
been such a weird time in your industry.
It
So
has been.
it's
Yeah,
like,
I think I did two movies last year that'll come out at some point. I did a few episodes on The Penguin with HBO that'll come out soon-ish. I wrote and directed a short film that's festivaling right now. And I really love doing that too.
what was the name of that short?
3, 2, 1.
Okay.
I'll send you a link if you want to see it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, I would love
I
to.
really love it. You know, I wrote music for years and years. And yeah, so I've always been a writer, but this is like, it's very different to write, you know, story rather than just sort of, you know, abstractness to music. So it's been really nice. That's been the one benefit of the strange few years we've had in this business, is it sort of forces you to self create more, you know. And that's always good to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking time to have this conversation and to go
Yeah.
pull back the memory from a show that you did quite a while ago. But it's amazing what a cool conversation came out of it.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. And to everybody who's watching this, go out there and watch Halt and Catch Fire. Bye, everyone.
Bye.